Start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And joining me here on stage is Matthew Thornton, our VP of Public Affairs, and Larissa Smith, who is our Manager of Policy. And I'm also happy to acknowledge Janice Myers, our Executive Officer at the Ottawa Real Estate Board, joining us here today, and fellow Director and Chair of our Government Relations Committee, Mr. Sean Morrison. I just want to thank everybody for being here today. So, on behalf of our 70,000 member realtors, we are happy to deliver one message to provincial policymakers, and that is Ontario must take steps to protect homeowners and prospective home buyers against the health and safety risks associated with former marijuana grow operations. Make no bones about it, as of this summer, more Ontarians are going to be growing legal pot at home. And proposed federal rules permit up to 4 plants of unlimited height to be grown in any Ontario home. Consider, for example, Denver, Colorado, where only a few years ago cannabis was legalized in that state. And Metro Denver police estimate that 1 in 10 homes in that city has cannabis being grown in it. Not to mention the thousands of Ontarians who have medical prescriptions to grow cannabis in their home now. And often these prescriptions exceed the 4-plant rule, creating sizable grow-ops in homes that were never built to house them safely. And that's just legal grow operations. Crime syndicates often use residential buildings to grow marijuana, causing significant structural damage to the property. And every year, law enforcement busts hundreds of grow operations across the province, many of them in middle-class Ontario neighborhoods. And despite the province's best efforts, we're concerned that organized crime will continue to have a large role in the illicit cannabis market. Former cannabis grow operations, even on a small scale, they can pose significant health and safety issues for unsuspecting home buyers. These risks are often masked by owners of existing grow operations when the property is sold, making it very difficult for home buyers and realtors to detect problems like mold and fungus. And growing cannabis indoors, it requires high temperatures and high humidity, which can lead to the formation of black mold and other types of fungus, which are particularly problematic for our seniors and young children with breathing issues. Former grow-ops can also have structural issues like electrical box tampering, which could lead to home fires. And finally, chemicals used in the production of cannabis are often left inside the residence, and they can be very harmful to humans. Stopping unsuspecting home buyers from entering into a potential nightmare scenario where their family is faced with these health and safety issues is at the root of our call to action here today. Every day, realtors work with Ontarians who've spent years saving up for a home where they can raise their families. These people consider every detail of their purchase: number of bedrooms, size of the yard, the condition of the electrical, the plumbing and windows. They want to know exactly what they're buying and with their hard-earned money, and they deserve to know. And as a realtor, it's unsettling not always being able to inform buyers of a home they're considering was once a marijuana grow-op. And if a realtor knows that a home they're showing was once a marijuana grow-op, they're obliged to inform their buyers. However, a realtor can't always know. And nor can home inspectors always detect the signs of a former marijuana grow-op. But OREA's 5-point action plan for cannabis legalization, which we're releasing today, will, if implemented, it'll create a regulatory shield for homeowners and unsuspecting buyers against the ill effects of former grow-ops and also homes where marijuana was grown legally. To protect buyers against illegal and legal grow-ops, we're recommending that first, the province designate illegal grow operations as unsafe buildings under the Building Code Act. This will ensure that grow-ops are black-marked and the owner will not be able to sell the home to an unsuspecting buyer until it's properly remediated. And the second is to mandate that illegal grow-ops are inspected by a municipal building official, who will then determine what remediation measures are required to make it safe. And this should be done according to provincial minimum remediation standards, so there's consistency across the province. Third, when a former grow-op is uncovered and the building is deemed unsafe, we're asking that municipalities be required to register work orders on title to remediate the property. Fourth, with home growth expected to increase significantly after legalization, the province should require that all licensed home inspectors receive training on how to spot the signs of a former grow-op. And finally, because the risks of mold and humidity are magnified in a smaller space, we recommend that in multi-unit residential buildings, like condos, the province reduce the number of plants permitted to be grown from 4 down to 1 for units of 1,000 square feet or smaller. Realtors would support a full ban on the home cultivation of marijuana. However, we don't expect the government of Ontario to take that step with legalization of recreational marijuana on the horizon. That's why we're calling on the provincial government to bring forward measures to ensure consumers are protected when they make the largest investment of their lives. And while the province has rightly focused its initial efforts on getting the sale and distribution of cannabis right, today we're calling on policymakers to turn their attention to protecting Ontario homeowners and prospective home buyers. To see OREA's 5-point action plan for cannabis legalization, I encourage you to visit protectontariohomeowners.com. Thank you for your attention, and at this point, we're happy to answer any of the questions that you may have for us today.
Do these suggested policy changes, particularly the one regarding 1,000 square feet, was it, or smaller, does that discriminate against lower income homeowners?
Well, the bottom line is their focus is trying to protect our consumers. And when you have 1,000 square feet, the damage that's potentially there could be very difficult for people to deal with. So we feel it's just not right, because just like with secondhand smoke, if you're in a condo and then suddenly down 3 or 4 people down the hall are growing, it can have a real impact on those people. And that's a difficult problem. And that's why with our focus on our 5-point action plan today, that's one of the key elements of it.
Is your organization more focused on the legal grows with 2, 3, 4 plants, or is a bigger issue illegal grow-ops with multiple plants?
Short answer is both. So the first 3 items of our action plan are really intended to tackle the illegal grow-op issue, which is the registry we're proposing to create. Points 4 and 5 are really getting at the crux of some of the long-term impacts that we anticipate with illegal grow. So it's not right after legalization happens, but down the road, the more often people are growing in those homes, those smaller grow-ups, the greater the impact on the housing stock of the province.
Did I hear you just say a moment ago that your organization would ultimately rather the government not allow people to grow plants in their home legally? Is that ultimately what OREA would like?
Ultimately, as an association, we would support that. However, we're trying to be pragmatic. We don't think that's going to happen. So if we think it's going to happen, what can we do to protect home ownership and unsuspecting or buyers that are coming into that? We just want to make sure we look after them.
Mm-hmm. I think whether or not it's legal or illegal to grow, the reality is that people are going to grow in their homes after legalization. So the question then becomes, what can the province do to protect those folks? And that's why we're bringing forward this action plan.
So let's say I buy a home in Toronto or in the surrounding area, and unfortunately for me, it's been used in the past as a grow-up that surpasses the regulations. So how much can it cost me to get it fixed?
Short answer is it all depends. It depends on the amount of damage done to the property, depends how much mold has seeped into the walls, what kind of structural issues associated with the property. But our members have seen properties where there are thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage. So it's not just the health and safety issues, it's also the monetary costs associated with some of these properties as well.
Sorry, Matt. So there's also a really great example that we included in the submission. It's a story out of Ottawa. It was a CBC story where the owner was an unsuspecting buyer, and she was out of pocket $30,000 for the remediation. So it can be a really substantial cost.
When there are really significant renovations that have to happen in a neighborhood, let's say, or in a tower, what kind of effect can that have on values and prices of homes next door or across the street, for example?
Excuse me, sorry. So in terms of the value, one of the things with our 5-point action plan we want to is to, sometimes when properties get stigmatized, with our 5-point action plan, it will give an opportunity to actually have it come off of the registry. And that's why we want to take control of it, have the municipality go in and look at what does need to happen. And at that point, then they can put it on title, and then once the remediation occurs and it's done, then it comes off the books, and you have a.
I think what you're getting at is, and what our plan is proposing is really certainty around how properties are going to be remediated. We're proposing that there be a standard, a provincial standard, by which all properties would have to be remediated, renovated, to ensure that buyers and all homeowners have confidence that any former grow-up that they're now in possession of is safe for their families to live in.
Like I realize you guys aren't contractors, but I guess could you speak to the severity of the kind of problems and the significance of the kind of jobs that you need to pull off to do those renovations? Because we could be talking about a grow up, I guess, of a whole bunch of different sizes here. But can you give me a sense of, if there's one in there for a long time, how big of a job is it going to be to make sure that it's a healthy place to live?
The short answer is significant. I've seen former grow-ups where they've essentially had to renovate the property down to the studs, rip everything out, and replace it. And I mean, in that instance, you're looking at thousands of dollars. And in particular, the structural issues are where you can get into the really big money, where folks have cored out foundations to run piping and stuff outside, or they've tampered with the electrical box. You've got to bring in professionals to do that work, and that's really expensive.
From a home insurance perspective, and going back to stigma, there have been incidents in the past where the insurer has knowledge that there has been growing, but there is not the resulting damage, but the stigma is still there, and they've refused to offer coverage for a buyer of that home where the plants have been present. Mm-hmm. Do you foresee this increasing in terms of these incidents and insurers not offering coverage?
Well, in terms of our plan, that's one of the things that we feel as an association it's important to work with the insurance companies. We want to work with anybody that can help with this problem. Mm-hmm. And that's a good example that you bring up. But if we do this properly and we partner with the municipalities as well, then that will make a significant impact, and it will show that, yes, there has been some damage to the property. It's been earmarked by the inspectors, by the building department. And yet now, once the proper things have been done, now that stigma, we hope, will come off the property and it's off of the title. So take a bit more control of it. So we hopefully, working in conjunction with the insurance companies, that will help with that problem, which you brought up.
But with respect to insurance companies and the banks, I think the greatest issue out there for those two organizations is the uncertainty that exists with these properties. There's no defendable standard out there currently that exists for these properties to be remediated to. So with the creation of a province-wide standard, as we're recommending it through our 5-point action plan, I think you're going to see a better response from insurers and the banks.
The fact of owning 4 plants as opposed to 1, can you just just elaborate on what the damage is going to be done to a home that is 1,000 square feet or smaller? Just talk a bit more about that.
Well, it's hard when you have 4 plants, and I haven't seen 4 plants growing, but we've got a lot of information that the 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness, what happens is when they grow them, they're in a high moisture environment. And that's the whole problem. And if you've got a small 600, 700 square foot condo and you're growing 4 plants in there, over time, the damage that could happen, the moisture, you don't always see it. Not everybody sees the mold spores occurring, et cetera. So that can be really damaging. And especially as we've identified in that part of our 5-point plan, if you've got condo with 100, 200, 300 units, if you have 10% of them, 15% of them, that could have a big impact on other people that don't choose to grow in their properties into their condos. But you know what? They have the impact of those that are around them growing.
There's another issue. I don't know if you put much thought to it, but it's just not the growing, but it's also the smoking of pot. If you go into a condo, you can smell it in the hallways, and it's creating condo wars. And I know in my little slice of my neighborhood, there's a war happening because there's a pot user next to one guy, and they're at war because it smells, and it affects, the smell sticks, and it affects not only the quality of the neighborhood, but it also sticks to the walls. Is the end user or the pothead that has a home or a condo unit, have you put any thought towards that and what the government should do to prevent someone from constantly inhaling someone else's smoke?
It's a good question. I think fundamentally the sort of personal use inside the property, you know, the federal government has already come out and said that, you know, that's perfectly permissible under the law. Those kinds of issues would be, you know, up to, you know, the condo board and the individuals within the condo to deal with. You know, our association is not taking a position on whether or not.
Property values, you know, if there's a pothead smoking nonstop beside your condo, your value goes down.
Yeah, you know, you raise a good issue, but I think fundamentally it comes down to what are the rules and bylaws in the condo and how they address those kinds of things.
If we want to mandate new parts of home inspections, and if we want to mandate new training for home inspectors, not saying it's not a good idea, but how much would you expect this would add to the overall cost of, I guess, the due diligence of buying a home?
I think it's a very important aspect of the due diligence, because what we're doing, we're protecting the home ownership and the rights of the individual consumers. So yes, there could be some added due diligence that's required, but you know what? It's an important aspect, and that's what we're trying to do with our 5-point plan, is to make sure that these people we're protecting the investment. So yes, there could be some more, to your point, however, very important.
Do you want to talk about the government's plan to regulate the home inspection industry?
Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why we thought, you know, the recommendation regarding home inspectors was very timely, was because, of course, they are implementing the Home Inspection Act, the Home Inspectors Act. They're going to become regulated, a licensed profession, and there is going to be an education component that's, you know, sort of incorporated into that. So this is timely in a way, because while they're considering that and while they're going through all those, you know, consultations to figure out what that's going to look like, we think this could very nicely slide into that process.
Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, in terms of cost, negligible. This is a small component of, I think, of a fairly wide-ranging training program that they're going to be required to take to get their license. Any other questions?
How does the policy could protect the landlord? The landlord, because say they have like 3 houses for rent, and the tenants grow the plants over there, and what's your policy could protect the landlord plus?
So first and foremost, I think one of our recommendations around restricting the number of plants in a multi-unit residential building, that's going to get to the heart of that issue, given that most landlords own condominiums or units that are in the multi-unit residential landscape. But you know, more importantly, you know, in the event that a landlord does discover that one of their tenants has grow up there, you know, they're going to be able to remediate it to a standard where they can demonstrate to subsequent tenants that this property is safe to be in. I think that's the more important question, but you know, the multi-unit residential piece is something that's definitely top of mind for us, and that's why we've addressed it as part of the 5-point plan.
Any other questions, anybody?
Can you elaborate also about what happened in Denver and other jurisdictions that legalized marijuana, in terms of how much of a growth was it in terms of illegal grow up? Was it significant? Do you have a proportion?
I don't know if we have any numbers. Maybe we do. I just know that the Denver police say that 1 in 10 are growing it in their homes, but I don't know how that changed. I don't know if we have any information as to what it was like before it was legalized, but obviously the impact of growing in a home is the same, and that's the problem, and that's what we're addressing in our 5-point plan. So.
Yeah, the key takeaways from the Colorado example is really twofold. Number one, and we can get you the numbers that which sort of support this, but the organized crime continued to have a large role in the distribution and sale of illicit cannabis. That was number one. And number two, the number of properties with grow operations in them increased to the point where the Metro Police Force in Denver estimates that 1 in 10 homes there have cannabis being grown in them. So, which speaks to, you know, the core of our call to action. You know, I think the post legalization, the number of homes that have pot being grown in them in Ontario is going to increase, and as a result, we need to take steps to address that. Great. Any more questions?
Anybody else?
Great. Thanks, everyone.